Hello there. We're going to talk about accentuation. And in this case, we're going to talk about words where the accentuation is imposed by a certain suffix. By suffix, I mean the end of the word. And these endings, these suffixes, tend to come from Latin, the Latin side of English. So we're talking about ION, we're talking about ITY at the end of the word, we're talking about ETY, and last but not least, we are also talking about IC. What we tend to see with words that end with these suffixes is that the accentuation is found on the syllable just prior to the suffix. So I'll give you some examples of words that finish with ION. A good example of that is the word nation. If I go for a slightly longer word, I have emotion. And then last but not least, I have a word like fascination. Now, if I look at each time, I look at each of the suffixes, I go back one syllable, and that's where I will find the accentuation. So that means for each word, I'm going to accentuate that syllable just before. Nation, emotion, and of course, fascination. The same goes for other suffixes. And so we can see that with ITY, if you look at an example of that, would be the word sanity. If I go for a slightly longer word, you'll see community. And again, a slightly longer word, practicality. The same occurs even though the suffix is 2 syllables long. If we go back one syllable prior to the suffix, that's where we're going to find our accentuation. And we could talk about primary stress in this case, because sometimes the words that we're talking about are quite long, particularly the last one. So that's why we find sanity, find community, and practicality, where we have 2 accentuated syllables. What is correct for ITY is also true of ETY. So we can see some words with ETY, including society, or something like variety, or perhaps even anxiety, all of which finish with ETY. If we go back one syllable prior to the ETY, which we're going to do here, then we can see that the accentuation is found on that syllable. So what that gives us is something like society, variety, and of course, anxiety. The last aspect we need to talk about as well is how we pronounce the syllables that are not accentuated. So for example, if you look at society, the first syllable is se, the same for variety, the same for community, and the same for practicality, and the same for fascination. The syllables that are not accentuated tend to become diminished and become u. If we head now to ik, the final suffix that we're looking at, we'll start with a short word like magic, another word which is slightly longer, terrific, and lastly, economic. If you look at these words, obviously you can see the pattern. The accentuation will be found on the syllable just prior to the suffix. So what that gives us is an accentuation on the first syllable for the first word, magic, the accentuation on the second syllable for the second word, terrific, and the accentuation on the third syllable and also on the first syllable for economic. And that's what we can see in these examples. Again, that first syllable of terrific will be an E sound, and the second syllable for economic will also be the E sound.